On this episode of A Soul's Quest podcast, Omar and I are going to be discussing why positive and negative feelings are indications that we're ready to go on our quest. Stay tuned. So, how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Good.
Yeah.
How have you been since the last episode?
I've been well. I've been really well. Just a lot of learning, a lot of, I'm going through an interesting stage of somewhat introspection, being somewhat of a hermit, and reading and meditating and praying. And
Yeah, you said that
just,
last time a little bit, or touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, so just kind of like continuing on that adventure of internal insight and
Adventure or quest?
ooh, look at you keeping up with branding, huh? You're funny.
I got it right here.
You got it right there.
I got you. I got your back.
I see that. How about you? How have you been?
I've been good. I have been sort of the same, not necessarily doing what you're doing, but since, I had a great weekend, and since, which is what we're going to be talking about today, since a couple of things have happened, I've been very focused and much more motivated and feeling much better about my place.
Okay.
So yeah, but we'll talk about all that.
But there's something that happened actually that made us come up with this episode, or it was ironic because the timing of your experience
yeah,
in your quest kind of like segued us right into this specific episode.
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that.
Okay. Yes,
so
we're going to talk.
I'm going to bring us there. So
yeah, we're going to talk.
We're going to do the episode the same way we normally do it, but this time I have my cheat sheets.
I got my cheat sheets too,
and I got my wine. I got cheat sheets and wine. I'm ready to go.
I got nothing.
And I got my lip balm.
I got nothing.
Well, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by reading a quote for each of the questions that I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
And I want to start with that because I think these quotes are really powerful. And you gave them to me, so I want to make sure that I read them.
Excellent.
So, all right. This quote is a quote from Joseph Campbell that he has it's in his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. So, whether small or great, no matter what the stage or grade of life, the call rings up the curtain, always on a mystery of transfiguration, a rite or a moment of spiritual passage, which when complete, amounts to a dying and a birth. The familiar life horizon has been outgrown. The old concepts, ideals, emotional patterns no longer fit. The time for passing of the threshold is at hand. And so that's like the perfect quote. It's like, it gives me chills because it's like,
yeah,
that's it. It's time. So that leads into my question of, the crossing of the threshold is that call to action, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question that I have is, what is the call to action?
Yeah. Well, the call to, what he actually called it is the call to the adventure, right?
Okay.
Call
to the that's right. Sorry.
Yeah, the call to the adventure. We'll call it the call to the quest, but that's the first stage on the hero's path, on the hero's journey, right? And
which you've talked about in season 1.
In episode, yeah.
And we also talk about it in the last episode that we did,
episode
right?
of season 2, yeah. And the idea is that these are moments in our lives in which we are called to go beyond the normal confines of our world, of our reality, of our culture, of the things that we're accustomed to, right? And those are times that are pivotal because we get to make a choice. We actually will choose to either answer that call and pursue what those urges are, or we could decide to suppress it and not confront it, But these are moments in our lives that are transformational, and they will lead us into places that we really don't know.
Unfamiliar territory.
They're unfamiliar territories. We don't know exactly what we will get out of it. But there's There's that the quest aspect of it. There's that the exploration part of ourselves, or wanting to know or experience things that are beyond our normal everyday existence.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It does make sense. I feel like it's in to put it in practical terms, it's, you know, it can be a new relationship. It can be a new job. It could be the loss of a love. It's different things, isn't it?
It depends on your situation, and it depends. This is why we always talk and we emphasize on the individual,
right?
And the individual experience and how unique it is, because it all depends. So I can't tell you that my call to the adventure or my experience, it's going to be the same as yours. Mm-hmm. There are common denominators, there are common themes, and there are common things that we could learn from each other. Mm-hmm. As to, for instance, when the situation presents itself, mm-hmm. how are you going to deal with that initial fear, with that anxiety? How are you going to go beyond the fear of leaving the normal into the fear of going into the unknown?
So you're sort of answering my next question, because the thing that I was going to ask you next is, why is it that people sort of, I don't want to do that, I'm not going mm-hmm. there. Like, they refuse to accept that call to the adventure. Like, why, I think you've talked about that as a problem.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why we don't choose to listen to ourselves is because there are many things. First, we live in a society. We live in the macro level. We're humans. As you start going down, we live in a country. We live in a culture. We live within a family. We live in those different perspectives, right? In those different realms, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And there's a certain judgment and a certain fear of not belonging that gives us the hesitation of following our own path. Like, nobody wants to be called the weird person of the family, or nobody wants to go against their culture or criticize their culture, even though their culture is wrong, mm-hmm. because you fear being ostracized and pushed aside.
So it's a societal thing.
It's a cultural thing, because we want to belong. We want to fit in. Mm-hmm.
So it's a status thing too, then.
It's a status, because we want to be a part of something. And to go out and be invulnerable and trying to do something that is uniquely yours puts you in that judgment realm, mm-hmm. that you will be different. You will be looked at differently. There's a book that I love. It's called Illusions, right, by Richard Bach. It's I think it's like the Life of a Reluctant Messiah, I think is the underlying title, but it's Illusions, right? And there's these little creatures that live in a river, and one of them decides, and their existence, their life is clinging to the bottom, so the current doesn't take them, right? So then this little creature decides to let go, right? Because
you can just see it
just dangling, right? Yeah, so he just decides to let go, and the current takes it, you know. And at first, he bangs against rocks and gets hurt and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And then, but eventually he finds his way. Richard Bach has another book that has the same type of theme, is Jonathan Livingston's Seagull, right? And it's the seagull that he learns to fly really high and dive really deep. So instead of eating the scraps, mm-hmm. he goes deeper to find the whole fish. But in the midst of all that, he was looked as a weird. It's like, why are you so concerned with flying high? Why are you so concerned with speed and diving deep? These are the things that you'll be confronted mm-hmm. when the call to the adventure hits. Right. And in a practical sense, because again, a lot of these experiences is just in a movie. We see it in the screen, and we're like, oh my God, I wish I could be like Neo that answers, meets Morpheus and all that stuff, But this is what happens in you, and you see it. And the people that are courageous enough to answer that call, some of them, again, this is the part when it gets a little tricky, because then you start measuring, because there's an aspect of what you'll find that is a life that is uniquely yours, but it may not be in the it doesn't come out with a grand scheme as, let's say, for instance, Steve Jobs, right? Dropped out of school, did all these things that he did because he wanted to do it, because he had a vision, an idea of how he wanted what he wanted, and that's that is an individual quest, but that was his thing. Mm-hmm. The problem lies when we start comparing a person that really wants to live a simple life, or that wants to live from that point of view and doesn't really get that recognition, and then we start comparing it to someone like Steve Jobs. There's those extremes and everything in between. Mm-hmm. The problem is that, so the call to adventure, people fear answering that call because, well, I don't know exactly in that spectrum where I'm going to end up. I want to end up like that so I could be recognized in my society, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So just that fear that you may not get that recognition if you follow it, that's something that holds people back.
So then what does the individual do?
Ultimately, it's really choosing. Now, you could choose not to and live your life. And it may be a good life. And it may be a life that is productive in societal terms. You may have that status. You may have the recognition of the group. You may have all that, and it's okay. You don't have to listen to it. This is not like a mandatory thing. Mm-hmm. But if you feel that you're constantly having that void, that void inside of you is there, as to not finding things to be fulfilling or things to be that it grows you. Mm-hmm. Then you should really take a look into more in depth with it. Mm-hmm. But it's ultimately a choice, mm-hmm. And if that void persists and you never investigate it or go into figuring out why that void is still there, it may persist and it may become bigger and bigger and bigger. And before you know it, you look back at your life and you might say, what the hell was that for? I mean, you see it happen. Yeah. And then we start clinging to things that gives us identity, Mm-hmm. But those things are not, they're not bringing light into the world. They're really creating separation. And you see that a lot mm-hmm. with certain types of people that think that they have arrived or I don't want to follow that because I'm so set in a certain way mm-hmm. that you become the villain.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So basically the call to adventure is that that moment where you just feel that push, that feeling inside. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody feels it differently, but you feel it, right? But you know that it's either a choice you make or something that's just thrown at you. Mm-hmm. And basically the issues and the problems surrounding that is the societal pressures that we feel by families, cultures, status and things like that. And mm-hmm. so what you're saying, to just wrap up this segment, is that we have to make a choice.
Yes.
Bottom line. Mm-hmm. So, okay.
If you don't choose, something will be chosen for you.
Yeah. I was just going to say that. You said it for me, but that's okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It sounded good from you too. But I was going to say, I think in some ways you're forced in one way or somebody else is going to do it. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So, again, I'm going to read another quote. This is also by Joseph Campbell. Mm-hmm. The usual hero adventure, the call to the adventure, begins with someone from whom something has been taken or who feels there is something lacking in the normal experience available or permitted to the members of society.
Mm-hmm.
The person then takes off on a series of adventures beyond the ordinary, either to recover what has been lost or to discover some life-giving elixir. It's usually a cycle, a coming and a returning.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how does the call to the adventure manifest itself in our lives?
Okay. I'll give you an example of something that is currently happening, right? Which is the, what is it called? The equality, inclusion. What is it? The
diversity, inclusion?
Diversity, inclusion, and equality.
Inequality. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
I heard actually.
It's like a big movement.
Yeah.
Right
So
now.
I heard someone, I heard Jordan Peterson call it today, DIE. Typically it's DEI. He called it DIE. And it was interesting because this is a movement in which, if you read that quote,
yeah,
you have individuals that are looking at inequality in our world, and they want to bring a balance into it, and so that is a quest that they chose to take because they're observing what's happening in the world, and they feel that things should be equal for everybody. Now, we could sit down and we could debate as to the validity of whether or not this is that the approaches are right, or the approaches are really benefiting our society as a whole. So that is kind of like the debate that you see. But what you can take away on both sides of the argument is the fact that people realize that things are not as good as they should be, right? So that is a call to a quest, to an adventure. That is a call to the adventure to bring more light and bring a change into a societal structure.
Mm-hmm. To bring a consciousness to that, right?
To bring an awareness that yeah. Now again, whether the methods and the outcomes are those things are up for debate.
Yeah.
And they're up for negotiation, and they're up to actually have a really important dialogue as to the pros and the cons and things of that nature. But that right there is consenting and seeing in your immediate environment something that needs to be changed, right? And that's something that is a vivid example of a call to the adventure. You're consenting and you're seeing this because your environment needs to change.
Mm-hmm. So those individuals who embark on that quest
Mm-hmm.
to increase awareness about diversity, inclusion, equality, it manifested in them because they saw that there was a need or a problem.
Correct. Okay. Now, again, this conversation is not about debating the proper way of going about that.
No.
It's just symbolizing that.
Right.
Another example of consenting,
and that's so you're saying that's the consent.
Yeah, that's something that you're choosing based on what the environment is giving you, right? Because again, there's two parts. There's the one in which the environment dictates action, to take action. Manifest destiny. Go west. When you look at a war, a warrior. Those are quests because you have to, the environment dictates that. So you go into that. The one that I'm more interested in, and the one that we are focusing on, it's the one that comes without consent. And that typically just happens psychologically, mentally, emotionally, the totality of who you are. That's the part in which we want to focus on, because this is the one that creeps in our anguish, in our mental. This is the one that I think our society right now really is pushing aside, right? Because at the end of the day, the beautiful thing about our society, about Western society, is the emphasis on the individual, right? and their individual freedom and their individual responsibility. And what you're seeing right now is it's the tittering between systemizing things that take away from individuals. So the psychological quest to the adventure it's so important to understand right now because of what we are dealing with. And what we're dealing with is a really, really fast-paced informational age, a fast noise growing society that to making a choice as to what's important for my life and what's the right thing to do and what should I do, who should I listen to, all that is so in flux that our souls, that part of us individually that says, oh my God, it's not being listened to. And I think, again, this is my hypothesis. I don't think this is a theory, but look at all the advancements that we've had in every single field, every field. But the major crisis of our time, really, it's all mental health, right? Opioid narcotics epidemic, depression, anxiety. If you look at the major issues that we're confronting in our society, a few of them have to do with materials, but most of them have to do with our mental, emotional, our soul is yearning.
Yeah.
And we embark on quest now subconsciously because it's dictated by society, and we're constantly looking for the next fix. One day people want to try mushrooms to connect. The next day they want to try ayahuasca to connect. The next day they want to try something else to connect. We're constantly seeking for that experience of being alive, and we don't know which way to go. And I think that right now is being driven by our environment, but internally we don't know how to make sense of that.
Yeah, so we're grasping for things to help us to navigate that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is self-defeating behaviors or actions, and then others is maybe something that is good for you or whatnot, but you're still not necessarily facing the issue.
Yeah, like internally, you're not fulfilled.
Right. You feel that.
Internally, people know this. People realize this. We take on courses and we take on things that we feel are going to give us meaning and value, and then you end up in your solitude when you're alone. You end up feeling like, oh man, it's like, you work yourself to death because you can't stand being alone and quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't go to dinner and have a conversation with the person in front of you without checking your phone.
Yeah.
We're so distracted and so disconnected from the experience of life.
It's almost as if, and I don't think it actually overcomes this. Let me start with this. It's almost as if all the noise sometimes suffocates the feelings and the emotions that you get when it's time to go on your adventure, whether with consent or without, right? And so I know that eventually are unfulfilled with the Facebooking and TikToks and IG and things like that. And even though you're grasping for things to sort of temper that, I think that no matter what, it's going to surface at some point.
It will.
Right.
I mean, like, you can't escape it. It's like, I always wonder, like, the sustainability of like our culture long term, in the expectations of success, because everything is always supposed to be growing, and the trajectory is that. everything, the economy always needs to be growing. Everything needs to be always on the upwards. Like, where does it end?
Yeah.
And what are the causes of that always continual growth?
Right.
Obviously innovation, but innovation is a cyclical process. Things go up, things go down. You got the Industrial Revolution and the taper, and then the information age came about. So you have the fluxes. I mean, like, and sometimes we don't accept that that's a cyclical nature of life, as it is.
Yeah.
So that's the part. I know I'm rambling on right now, but the reality
I'm
is
about to cut you off. Don't worry.
Okay. but the reality is that is like, we are constantly looking for more.
Yeah.
And the reasons why we look at it is that we're turning away from and I said it before because it doesn't make any sense to our modern life what living a spiritual life looks like or what that is. Like people, I'm of the firm belief that people really go to churches and synagogues and to get a competitive advantage, meaning that they go for that because they want to be in the good graces of God, either here or in the future. I've seen very few people who like really, really live. Me having a Christian background, I've seen very few people that really live a Christian life. Without judgment, without accepting other people, and some of those people are the people that are technically the people that more often live by that as some of the most humble people that I have ever met.
So, and I might have lost why you bring that up, but why does that matter? The whole going to church and living a Christian life.
I bring that up because, again, our society doesn't really value living a spiritual life.
Okay, I understand what you mean.
That's what I'm saying. Like, they don't really value that.
So you think that people...
And I think people go to church and they do these things.
They do the action.
They do the actions and they go through the process. But if you look at our society and if you gauge a society really by what they believe in, our God is money. That's truly what it is. I defy anybody to show me otherwise. Right now, it's like we could have that argument all day, but I don't see the gospel. I mean, even in the spiritual life, the gospel of prosperity has taken over what really the message of Christianity is.
Okay. All right. So because we have to move on for sake of time. All right. Another quote that I'm going to read. I'm going to actually ask the question first and then I'll read the quote. So the question that I have is, what type of feelings and disturbances does the call to the adventure arise within us or bring up within us? So the quote is, again, by Joseph Campbell in The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And it says, Freud has suggested that all moments of anxiety reproduce the painful feelings of the first separation from the mother, the tightening of the breath, congestion of the blood, etc., of the crisis of birth. Conversely, all moments of separation and new birth produce anxiety. So what do you mean by that?
I'm going to
actually, yeah.
Go
so
ahead.
what do you mean by that? No. What do you mean by that?
This is kind of like a perfect place to talk about like our individual examples, right?
Okay.
So recently you went through something, right? And you want to talk about it a little bit? Tell us exactly what you went through, and how did it make you feel?
Okay. So I would like to preface my very, very quick story with, I've been having these spurts of feelings of discontent in the last several, especially the last 2 years. Some people are going to say it's COVID or whatever. That's just one of the many parts of what I'm feeling or going through, but I've had spurts and I've done what we talked about. I digressed. I said, nope, not going to deal with that. Just everything's great in my life. And just kind of swept it under the rug. I hate that sweep under the rug terminology, but
He has his sources, yeah.
Yeah, but that's basically what I was doing, was not confronting those issues, right? So recently, I was in a position that I thought would be, that I felt was an open door for me, that I could actually get into and have a meaningful opportunity to start teaching and sort of, I'm not getting a doctorate for nothing, you know what I mean? And I want to be able to give back knowledge that I have attained throughout this degree. And sadly, that did not work out. And it didn't work out in a way that was hurtful and painful for me personally, without going into too much detail.
So the question, and that right there, how did it feel?
So it was, like I said, painful, hurtful. More than that, it brought up feelings of feeling like I was less than. It brought up feelings of not feeling good enough. I questioned a lot of things about myself. The way that I look, the way that I act, my skill set.
You're too pretty.
What I have to offer, things like that. I didn't say that, but thank you. So, but and rather than looking at what my skills and my values to the organization are, other things were looked at, and that was hurtful to me. And I was hurt. I mean, I had an angry cry, a hurt cry, and I had a confrontation with you about it that I'm super grateful for today, because sometimes when you go through the call to the adventure, it's sometimes the people that are closest to you that will just put it out there and just like tell you what you need to hear.
Or betray you.
Or
turn you away or disregard you. Yeah.
In this case, you call me out, and I was like, whatever. And I didn't want to, again, sweeping that under the rug. And then finally I went into our bedroom and I was writing, and I realized that maybe I am harboring feelings of anger, frustration, fear, resentment, hurt, all the emotions that I can possibly think of. Anxiety, not feeling like I'm good enough, not feeling valued. A lot of things like that is what I felt.
Yeah. So again, if you look at that quote, right, and it's talking about a birth and a death and the feelings associated with that, right? So when a child comes out of the womb, it's crying. It comes out of the comfort zone that it was in. That the place, the fluid, the warmth, the security there, and it's brought out, like literally
abruptly
ripped out from discomfort.
That's how it feels.
That is the feeling. That is the anguish that we feel when these situations happen.
And that's what it felt like just a big disruption, like, oh shit.
Exactly.
I need to do something. And at first it wasn't that, but I will tell you that for me, what happened was it just revitalized me, and it really made me make myself accountable, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And just made me realize that I've been loyal, to an organization for a long time. And, unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of reciprocity in that, in my opinion. Some people are looking out for me, but more people are not.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay, because I understand that, it was like you told me that day, you deserve better. Yeah. And I do deserve better.
And so to bring it back into the call to the adventure, that's a realization that, and it's not egotistical. A lot of things say, well, why would you deserve better? It's like, you do deserve better. If you're desiring for something, there's one thing to say that you don't have the skills to do something. That's true. You need to develop those skills. But in your stage, and the sacrifice that you have made, it calls for something more. to have an opportunity, at least, to be able to showcase her talents without being questioned prior to doing the job. So and those are the things that are pretty interesting, and that is a practical example that a lot of people go to. And the feeling is that feeling of disillusion, right?
Yeah.
That emptiness. It's like a death.
It is.
The beautiful part about it is that there's also a resurrection from it.
That's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, because and that feeling is an energizing feeling, right?
It is.
How does it feel now that it's like now that you reconciled, you're almost like that baby that gets adjusted to living outside of the womb.
Right.
How does that feel?
So this is a fresh experience for me, but because we're using this as an example, I'm thankful that it happened. And I walk the halls and I think I'm good now. I'm in a different place. I'm in a different headspace now. Yeah. I'm not in the headspace that I was in before. Now I'm in the headspace of Jesse has to take care of Jesse. I'm going to do everything that I can do. I'm not a person that just abandons what I'm doing. I still stay the course, so to speak, in terms of being, helpful and doing what I do, but I'm also focusing on the things that I need to do. So it is a rebirth in terms of I have a new focus. I feel empowered. I feel strong. I feel like, we've always had a really good, like, not only are you my husband and my lover and all this other crap, but lover. Okay. Well, people say that, but you're my best friend. And so to have somebody like you on my side and who knows what my worth is, just made me realize I have to know what my worth is. Yeah. And so it is like a resurrection and it feels that way. So it feels good. I feel lighter. I'm not saying that everything is clear. I'm not saying that things are not, I'm not sure. I have no idea what's going to happen. But
that right there is the interesting thing about it all too. That's the other part of it, because even though this is the part that the part that I'm in right now, we've consciously decided to do this and other things just to make sure that we gain more time for ourselves, more time for creativity, more time for growth, more time to share with other people. So everything that we do has a certain intention involved in it. The interesting part of it all, and this is the part that now that we answer the call and we're going through it, is not knowing what the outcome will be.
Yeah.
No
clue.
And that's the scary part.
It is a little scary.
But it's also the beautiful part about embarking on a quest, because there's you don't know exactly what you're going to find out. Granted, we have a plan, right? I'm not advocating being
reckless.
Being reckless, you set up a path in which direction you want to go. You look at your finances, you look at your pain threshold, right, and you look at all those practical things which you can't get away from, right, and then you understand that you may have to give up some stuff.
Yeah, sacrifice.
You have to sacrifice, right, in order to follow on that path.
Definitely. And
you'll continue on that path. And what you find along the way is you never know. That's the beautiful thing about it too. It's being able to utilize, and this is what are the things that we're going to talk about much later in the episodes that we
later in the season.
Later in the season, it's the idea of understanding your values as to why you want to embark on this. Now that you arrived at this point, and you're like, oh shit, I need to change. Why do I need to change? What are the values that you want? Yeah. And then be able to set goals and targets to follow along, and then being able to adjust when new revelations and new things come about. So it's that encompasses the entire journey.
Right.
And there's many things along the ways that we're talking about, but even though we're talking about something psychologically and that comes from within, the important part is always to have a balance between the practical aspect of it, of that emotional, psychological, spiritual aspect, but also the physical aspect. There needs to be a balance.
Okay. So next, I'm going to ask the question first on this one too, but I also have another quote.
Sure.
All right. So now that we have an idea of how we can make a little bit of sense out of what, about our human predicament, right? How does the individual, like, how do we move forward? Okay. So I'm going to read this quote. It's another one by Joseph Campbell. I can tell he's your favorite. And it's
One
of. And it's from The Pathways to Bliss. And then the subtitle is Mythology and Personal Transformation. Maybe you should put these books in the
description.
In the description, so people can have access to them,
yes,
because these are really good books according to you. I've never read any of them. I think I've read one. Anyway, okay. Here's the quote. What is it we are questing for? It is the fulfillment of that which is potential in each of us. Questing for it is not an ego trip. It is an adventure to bring into fulfillment your gift to the world, which is yourself. There is nothing you can do that's more important than being fulfilled. You become a sign, you become a signal, transparent to transcendence. In this way, you will become a realization of your own personal myth.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
This is, if you listen to this, right? It's the same thing as in The Alchemist, follow your personal legend, right? The idea behind it is, again, I keep saying that, I've said that several times. We are a way for the universe to know itself. We are manifestations of the universal energy in the here and now, in our physical form. And how we choose to utilize that energy depends on us. And it's our choice, right? There's energy of destruction in the nature and in the universe. That's a natural energy. And there's a nature of recreation of life. They're both the same. Two aspects of the same coin. The duality, the aspects of it all. So for us, it's about finding that within ourselves. The first thing is finding that duality within ourselves, balancing those opposing energies within ourselves, and live our lives from that point. And by doing so, you shine light into somebody else's life and somebody else's life. Now, this is where it gets problematic. When it gets really problematic is when and this is inevitable, and this is something that we have to fight constantly, is the comparison game. And we're going to have an episode on comparison in particularly, because our society, again, our modern society, and societies for all that matter, always measure people and compare people. But we do it to an extreme. We do it to an extreme. And it's if you look at it, it's just really for the temporary pleasure of being superior to someone, because it's only temporary. It's only temporary that you are that person or the it person. Everybody talks about the GOAT, the greatest of all time, and in that domain, in that aspect, in what you did, yes, they were the greatest. But they also only represented an aspect of things, not a whole totality of the universe, So finding your own path and then being able to live from that, and you bring light in the things that you're doing into your environment. And that is the beauty of following your own personal myth, following your own personal legend, and going on your quest.
So then, because you're talking a lot from like the spiritual aspect of this, right? Because there is this sort of, and everybody has it. Some people will say, "Oh, I'm not that. I think everybody has that connection or that intuition. That's what I would call it, is more intuition, which is that spiritual essence that people have, right? Because that's something that comes from somewhere. But what are the practical, like, because none of this is going to matter if you don't actually apply practical principles to making these things happen. So talk about that.
I mean, like, on a practical sense is, let's say you choose a career, right? Let's say you, I can't say, for instance, one of the careers that is pretty interesting to me to see is, like, engineers are pretty interesting people, right? Because they're concerned about making sure something works and it works efficiently and all the time, right? That's like what an engineer does. They're really formulated on thinking about a process, to creating a process and create something that is efficient, you know? And that right there is in a practical thing, in a practical sense, them utilizing their skills and their inner energy to create something, using the faculties of their minds and exactly what's inside of them, you know? And that's an attributed to that, you know, but it's efficient, you know, their value and what's important to them is that, you know? So let's think of for a teacher, you know, a teacher, and some of us have been across two types of teachers. The one that are just concerned about going to class, doing the thing, and making sure they do their 30 years or so they could retire. Or a teacher that really, really cares about you learning not just the material, but being ready to go out for life. You know? I remember for me, one of those teachers was Miss Cordone, my English teacher in high school. And the passion that she took to teach us not just the components of literature and the components of a story, but what it really meant and what was the purpose of it, and how did that apply it? How do you apply it into your lives? You know, I remember that we watched Excalibur in one of our classes, and we talked about Percival, who was the one that actually got the Holy Grail.
Wasn't the Excalibur rated R?
No, it wasn't rated R. It showed a booby, but that was pretty much it.
Oh my
that was
God.
pretty much it. Oh, you know who was in that movie that is like, she was hot. She's hot now, and she was in it.
Hotter than?
Helen Mirren. I'm sorry.
Really?
Yeah. Oh my God, she was in it. She is. That lady. Yeah.
She's aged very well too.
She is. Yeah.
She's pretty.
Sorry, that goes to the animal aspect in me too.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
I just
you know, I have a crush on Helen Mirren, anyways. But
okay. Anyway, yes.
But
focus.
anyways, but you know, she makes sure that we understood the role of what was the quest for. You know, the knights couldn't go and they couldn't follow somebody else. They had to go on their own. The struggle to be able to find that, you know.
So, but what are you saying this for? Like, how? Because not everybody has that.
No, that's not true. It's like whatever you choose to do in life. I mean, I talked about an engineer, talked about a teacher. You talk about anything that you decide to do, even if it's not a profession, in the way that you choose to upbring your family, in the way you choose to
That's what I'm saying.
parent.
What other practical ways? Okay.
In the way you choose
It
to
can
parent.
be in anything, really.
In the way you choose, we talked about at the beginning of this episode, talking about the DEI movement, you know, and the way of engaging people in conversation to understand, hey, minorities and people of color have been overlooked throughout history. And that is a fact. You know, they have been suppressed, and this has happened. Yeah. You know, and the other, what can we do? And have a conversation that doesn't take away or villainizes the different people because their ancestors did that to others, you know? But then also it's been able to have those conversations, but it also being able to realize that we could have that conversation in a productive way without demonizing others. And also, I'm a minority. and I have been exposed to those type of treatments of being treated like the other and things like that, and it's hurtful. It's very difficult to be looked at as the other. I've seen how people have treated that, and I get it, but I also don't want my chance to hold the whip. You know,
Yeah, I get it.
And I think that's
your choice.
That's
that
my
you're
choice. Like, I don't want to hold it. I want to hold you accountable if you continue to act like that.
Right. But you're not trying to do that to other people or impose that on other people.
But I you know what you're seeing with it, and what you're seeing, and these are practical things that people could actually do, is that you have to be able to get to a certain point in which you understand history, you understand what happens, and you understand the human capabilities of hurting others, and you could go and you could defend people and you could do all those things without becoming the oppressor or the one that destroys somebody else too. So these are examples of the things that we could do. So all these things are complex things in the macro level, but in the individual sense, as an individual, you choose. You know that your actions have a ripple effect. You know, so if you decide to be a jerk or a dick to somebody, or you act like a fool in front of people, that has a ripple effect. You know, it might not only be a reflection on you, but it might be a reflection on a lot of other things. So behave socially. Take care of your family. Spend time with your family. Do those type of things that are important. And those little things that may seem insignificant, they have a big impact on the totality of it all.
So do you think when people, just to make sure that I'm understanding what you're going at, because you were speaking from the macro level, and you're talking about our actions and our behaviors affect other people, thus that affects our call to the adventure?
Well, that's part of it. Well, this now you're in it. Now you're involved.
So making sure that while you're going through it, that your actions and behaviors are not affecting other people in an adverse way.
Yeah, and that's where choices come about. Right. You know, and people will say, well, whatever I do is going to have positive and negative consequences to an extent, but you can minimize the negative effect that we have on other people. And people say, well, just be kind to someone. As you go through all these emotions and all these feelings and all this pain and transformation, you should always keep in mind that other people are going through it too. The people are experiencing that too, regardless of race, gender, regardless of whatever perceived separation or physical separation we may have. Somebody else is going through it too. And you have to recognize that, because that is if you don't, and you think that you are unique to this experience, then you become the villain.
Gotcha. Okay. So basically, just to summarize this entire episode, the call to adventure is basically that feeling that we have within us that arises, just kind of comes out of nowhere when you least expect it.
It's that death, like just being pulled out of the womb.
And sometimes it's sort of that moment where you have a choice that you need to make, right? And those feelings are feelings that we need to confront. We need to embrace them. We need to understand them, sort of just go through the process and not suppress that. And then basically at the end of the day, you go on your quest. At some point you're going to go on your quest or your journey or your adventure, right? We call it the adventure. And what you're speaking of, just to end this whole thing, is that when you go through your adventure is just to be cognizant and aware of our effects on other people and the power that we have over other people in these processes and these times that you're going through. So is that basically what I heard from you?
I mean, that's quickly. That's a great summarization. I hope I didn't ramble. I did ramble.
You rambled a little bit, but that's why I was trying to ask you where you were going with the the end part. It was important, but I wanted to make sure that you drive the point of making sure that people understand that whether you're on your call to the adventure or you're not, at the end of the day, as an individual, as a human being on a planet with other human beings, we have to know our ability to affect other people and the power that we have. That isn't necessarily, I'm not saying it's not a part of this episode. It's what a Soul's Quest is about. This is what we talk about. So it's pertinent to what we're saying here. And I agree with it 100%. And I think that sometimes when people go on that call to adventure, in some ways they're humbled and they're more reserved about, I thought I was this shit, but now I'm like here. And just to remember that when you're going through this, you know what I mean? That now you're on the other side of the like you said. So I understand what you're saying. You know, I'm trying to keep you succinct and not let you ramble on, but I think it was a good point to make, and I just wanted to make sure that it was emphasized so it was clear. Hopefully I did that for our viewers and our listeners, but it makes sense because we human beings have a lot of power that we don't realize we have. And some people know it. And that's, again, the villain aspect that we're talking about. So, yeah. But this is a good episode. Hopefully people get something out of it and are given some strength to go on their call.
I like to listen. I like to hear what people have to say.
I would
about
love
it.
to hear that.
I hope to hear some comments or maybe
for sure
some pushback. Maybe I'm not afraid of respectful pushback.
You might get a little bit. You talked about church and you talked about whatever. But I think that viewers and listeners of our show and even people who are listening to our show who are not fans, they can't refute the idea and the premise of what we're talking about. They may not agree with certain concepts or certain ideas, and that is completely okay. You know what I mean? And we would love to hear back from people. I think that's really important. So that kind of dialogue is really a good thing. So if you like this episode, make sure that you subscribe, like, and share. Also, make sure you leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to know more about what a Soul's Quest is doing, check us out at asoulsquest.com.